It's my pleasure and privilege to introduce our first pair of speakers today, and they are from Verizon. Let me start with Lonnie Ingram, who is the Vice President of Verizon's Smart Communities organization and leads the company's initiative on digital transformation of cities, universities, sports venues. She is one of the original pioneers of the smart communities and IoT industry. For over a decade, beginning with her role as CFO of Cisco's Globalization Center, and later leading the company's Smart Connected Communities strategy. Lonnie has helped to enable the smart city industry through the development of consortiums and joint ventures and help seed innovation through investments in new IoT startups across the globe. Most recently, she's helping to transform U.S. cities by making strategic acquisitions and integrating them with the vast assets within Verizon, allowing for holistic, smart city, public-private partnerships with cities such as Sacramento, Los Angeles, and Boston. Lonnie is also a frequent speaker, stays active in her community, and advocates for diversity and empowerment, including giving a TEDx talk and speaking at women conferences in several countries. Lenny began her career in finance, earning her CPA at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and holds a BA from Gonzaga University and an executive MBA from Harvard Business School, where she is also an elected class officer. And before Lonnie comes to the stage, I'd like to introduce her co-speaker, and that will be Hugh Martin, who is the VP Strategy for Smart Communities at Verizon. In that position, he provides vision in emerging technologies and strategies for smart cities and the Internet of Things. He is currently leading the innovation of Verizon's Smart Communities platform and 5G and mobile edge compute use cases, such as video and autonomous mobility. He was previously chairman and CEO of Sensity Systems, a startup acquired by Verizon that developed products that convert older lighting systems to connected LED systems, which are controllable remotely. He has been involved in several other startups in different technical areas during his 40-year career in the technology industry. He also was an entrepreneur in residence and a CEO coach at Kleiner Perkins, a top venture capital firm. He earned a BSEE at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and he is often quoted in the trade and technical press and is a frequent speaker at events, including being a featured speaker at the Data Summit. He was named CEO of Fortune magazine's Executive Dream Team Startup Edition in 2011, and he was recognized by the World Economic Forum as a technology pioneer. So with that great background, I ask you to welcome to the stage our first speaker, Lonnie Ingram from Verizon.
Thank you. Thank you, Chuck. Well, good morning. What a fantastic crowd. You know, I'm just so honored to be in this room with the amount of brain power that exists between these walls. The type of innovation that you are all developing in the flash storage space is something that we rely on every day with new technologies that are changing the way that we work, the way that we live, the way that we play, and the way that we learn. So I wanted to start off with a big thank you to all of you for all that you do to create these fantastic new solutions and technologies that are enabling all of us. You know, one of the things that we wanted to do today, as we have about 30 minutes with you this morning, is just to kind of go through what some of these new technologies actually are. Where are we seeing the industry? Similar to the flash industry, the communications industry is also enabling a lot of the future technologies. And we're always having to continually evolve and change in order to meet the needs of these future capabilities. So I wanted to be able to start off having this dialogue with you about what these technologies are. How are we seeing them impact not just our environment, but how it really impacts the need for new innovation within the flash and the storage space. So we're going to go through that a lot today. We're going to go through a little bit of a use case as well to kind of bring it home. And finally also talk a little bit about how it impacts our business, how it impacts how we work with one another, and how we interact with our community in the future. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But I wanted to kick it off actually with a video. This is a video that we created integrated within Verizon, because normally when you think about Verizon, some of you might be thinking about an older telco organization, somebody who focuses on the phones, and that's about it. And to be quite honest, Verizon has shifted from being just that kind of a provider into really a high-tech organization over the past several years, with key acquisitions and a lot of innovation that we're trying to drive. So I thought I'd start off with a little bit of an internal view of who we are and how we're trying to change our industry from the inside out. And then we'll start talking a little bit more about those technologies. So if you could please roll the video.
Not waiting. Not waiting is what we do.
Okay.
And what we've been doing since 2000. We didn't wait to cover every corner of the country, even if most people never get to every corner of the country. We didn't wait to build a fiber optic network that to date is still the fastest way to transfer data.
It's like it was invented to make TVs amazing.
We didn't wait for culture to accept us.
Looks like somebody needs a new network.
We became part of culture.
In the strike zone.
It's the red zone.
Pretty sure it's the strike zone.
Because we didn't set out to become just another telecom company. We set out to deliver the promise of a digital world.
What's that mean?
It means it's scientifically awesome.
But by 2007, the digital landscape was changing at lightning speed. As competition entered the playing field, the conversation became all about prices and deals, and our customer was becoming younger and more digital. Verizon needed to humanize technology, from being a company you simply transact with to one that puts people at the center of everything we do, with innovations that give humans the ability to connect in ways we never imagined, made possible by engineers who are obsessed with making our network even more reliable.
We've got 18 mobile cell sites and over 100 generators on the way.
So we can help connect people when and where it matters most.
I don't know if you remember me, but my kids remember you.
I could see it in your face like, he is not giving up for me. He is not giving up for me.
Transforming Verizon into a company that not only helps people do more, but do more good.
Dad, I'm gay.
I will always love you, no matter what. You know I love you.
And we continue to evolve who we are, from our identity to our stores, from the rollout of new technologies like 5G, to how we interact with our customers, and to the consistent way we connect with our audience through the messages we reinforce, including the presence we're establishing in digital media with Oath and its influential brands.
Today, Unlimited gets the network it deserves.
All of which are just the start of delivering the promise of a digital world, because good things come to those who don't wait.
So I wanted to start off with that video because it really does show how we are changing for the future, and how we have to lead the pack on that, just like everyone in this room is having to do. One of the big areas that Verizon is focused on is the industry that I'm actually taking charge of within the Verizon, which is the smart communities area. That and autonomous mobility are new industries that are coming up that are really requiring us to think outside the box. It's requiring us to not only leverage a lot of the key assets that we currently have, but also building out for the future in ways that we haven't even fully figured out how to be able to address. Solving for real life problems, as you can see here on the slide. Things around traffic, public safety, how to be able to communicate with one another. This is a really great example of an industry that is ripe for change. It is an old-fashioned industry in many ways. Just like several of the other industries that are starting to evolve and move with the new technologies around communications, around sensors, IoT, robotics. These are all things that we're going to talk about today. And what I'm going to show is not only the impact of what something like this industry is going to do to our lives and how big it's going to be from a business perspective, but try and touch a little bit also on what that means for the flash industry. How much, again, that we rely on you to be able to help us be successful in moving these technologies forward. So let's just talk about IoT in general, right? So IoT is actually something that's been around for a long time, right? People have been talking about it for at least a decade, if not a little bit longer. But why all of a sudden are we seeing a lot more movement in IoT? Why do we have 75% of the leaders having a more favorable view of it than they did even just 2 years ago? Right? One of the main reasons for this is the fact that our communications technology and our flash technologies are now enabling IoT devices to do things that they couldn't do in the past. Right? The level of intelligence that we now have at the edge and our ability to actually learn at the edge is allowing for IoT industry to boom in a way that it wasn't possible even just a few years back. Right? And how big this industry is going to be is quite amazing. There's about 15 billion IoT devices that were existing back in 2012. And you know, it's great, it's grown to around 23 billion just this year. Significant, good growth, right? Most of them are single use case kind of sensors and devices. Each one of them requires storage for memory and it allows it to be able to be successful. But let's think about the future. By 2025, we expect to be able to have 75 billion of these IoT devices, right? Massive growth that's going to occur. And not only are these IoT devices going to grow in numbers, but they're really going to grow in the level of complexity. You're really going to start thinking about having little mini supercomputers in each one of these sensors as they start doing a multitude of activities, which is going to require gigabytes of RAM and flash memory in each one of those sensors. So it's something that we have to build for. 5G and what we call mobile access edge compute, right? These are technologies that I wanted to be able to talk about because in the communications industry, we are really seeing a fundamental shift in the way that use cases are going to be developed because of this technology. And this is going to have a direct impact on the way we actually need to build out our storage and our flash solutions of the future. So let's think about what 5G offers. It is going to be giving us high bandwidth. It's going to give us a lot more capacity, right? It's going to have low latency, so speeds that we've never seen before. It's going to be very dense and incredibly agile, right? So because of this, we now have to rethink how all of our use cases are now going to be developed. We need to be thinking about embedding the compute capabilities directly into the network fabric. Right? So when you think of these mobile access edge compute devices, this is actually bringing the compute capabilities into a local environment. Everything doesn't have to go all the way back into the cloud to be computed and back down again. Now all of a sudden, not just the edge devices that are sitting on a light pole or sitting inside a manufacturing facility or in a car are going to exist, but we're going to have these little mini compute stations that are going to be located all over the United States. The level of speed that will be enabled by these technologies is huge. And we need to ensure that we're able to build out the storage capabilities that meet that speed, right? And not only speed, because this is actually out into the environment, we need longevity in our solutions, in our storage solutions. You're not going to see cities replacing this too often. And from a communications perspective, we have to think 10, 15, 20 years out when it comes to longevity of the solutions that we're putting out on the edge. And we need to be able to have the storage group kind of keep up with that and help us lead in that movement. Another big area that's important for all of these solutions is really with regards to all the intelligence that is going to be required in each one of those edge devices. So, you know, artificial intelligence, computer vision, augmented reality, and virtual reality, right? You hear all these words all the time. What's really interesting about what we're seeing in this particular space is how many businesses are starting to incorporate these technologies into their day-to-day activities. As you can see here, 72% of business leaders find it fundamental into their business plans today, which means their technology roadmaps are adjusting. What they're actually building for their consumers and their customers are adjusting. And we need to be able to keep up with that. Even just last year, it is assumed that the worldwide data storage is going to surge to 163 zettabytes by 2025 that are going to need storage, right? And we're going to need that in order to be able to keep up with the technologies for the future. A great number of those technologies are going to be in the space of the new physical automation that will happen with robotics and with drones. You think about how much a robot needs to be able to know from an artificial intelligence perspective to do the various activities that they are driving. When you think about the robotics and the drone industry today, it's very single use case driven, right? We have one activity that a robot is actually moving forward with, especially in the manufacturing space, an industrial arm that's doing one activity. So it's going to need a minimal level of storage. It's going to be required, but it's not huge. In the future, where we're seeing the robotics and the drone industry, it's going to change completely. You're going to have a lot of multi-use cases, very complex type of machinery out there. Let's just take the drone industry as an example. Once regulations start adjusting and changing and you can start having those drones go further up in the air, think about the high-resolution cameras that are going to now be included in those drones. When those high-resolution cameras are included in those drones, because they can go up into a high space, we need the power to be able to see a broad area. The amount of storage that's going to be needed in that unit is going to increase significantly. It's going to need to be light, it's going to need to be flexible, and it's going to need to be very ruggedized. Those are the types of things that we need to be thinking about for the future. They're viewing that the market for robotics and drones is going to increase tenfold over the next 10 to 20 years. So we really need to make sure that we're keeping up with it. Again, not just the number of these devices, but really what we're talking about is the complexity within those devices, right? It's that combination that is going to really drive different types of use cases that we're not actually seeing today. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about before we have Hugh come up and really spend a little more time diving into the technology in more detail, let's go into a use case and play with it a little bit, is around security, privacy, and the data components that are a part of this, right? Security is a huge concern for us. In fact, the way that we've actually designed our units are really with privacy and security built into the fabric of our units. And we think about Flash in that way. One of our key partners, Toshiba, we actually leverage their Flash capability inside our video nodes and our core nodes, and we built in our privacy and our security around that. It's a very important area for us, and something that we want to be able to continue to develop with the industry here today. There's a lot of challenges that we need to be able to face in this particular space. One is really around encryption. We need to have encryption, but we don't need it to penalize the life of that unit. Again, these units need to be out there in the cities for 10, 20 years. So we've got to figure out a way to evolve our technologies to keep up with that type of demand. We also need to make sure that we minimize the attack surface, right? So the level of integration that needs to happen within the TCB is incredibly important. And again, Hugh will go into that in a lot more detail. I wanted to leave you with this note before we go into the use case, because especially for me, think about the types of solutions that we're building out in cities. We're talking about supporting our first responders. We're talking about managing all of the traffic activities that are sitting in a community and in an environment. We're talking about very personal type of information that cities are incredibly protective about. If we're really going to see this industry grow, they've got to trust our ability to protect that data, because it's not located inside a data center that is locked and secured. It's out there. So it doesn't have to just be ruggedized. It needs to be protected. So if somebody steals a particular unit, they don't have access to the data that's in that unit. And that's something that we really need to think through together. So with that, I wanted to be able to bring Hugh Martin up to be able to kind of go through one of our more detailed use cases. Hugh.
Good morning. I'd like to start first by talking about what the implications of what Lonnie's just been talking about you might think would be, which is with the advent of 5G and blindingly fast transmission speeds, you might think that all computing will now be done in Seattle, Washington, and there will be nothing anywhere else in the network because of the fast speed. But in fact, because of AI, machine learning, et cetera, as well as privacy, cybersecurity, video as a big deal, and other latency-sensitive use cases, now all we think about is latency. The number of milliseconds that things take is absolutely critical, and that changes how we think about distributed architectures. So from now on, you're going to see far, far more compute and storage at every node of the network. And if you take a look at what Microsoft with Azure Stack or what Amazon is talking about with Greengrass and beyond, they're starting to think about, okay, it isn't all going to be in Seattle. We're going to have to distribute cloud computing everywhere. We're going to want to take care of data as quickly as we get it. Get it, anonymize it, and then send it on. Video is going to be a very, very big deal. It's the most powerful sensor we have in terms of our eyes, in terms of situational awareness in cities and other places. Video is absolutely paramount. Video is tremendously consumptive of bandwidth, and so we want to process it early so we don't have to deal with it and so that we can minimize latency. So I say here square miles, it's going to be hundreds of square miles of silicon dedicated to flash is now going to increase. So I want to take you through one of the examples that we're thinking a lot about here at Verizon. So as you know, there's a tremendous interest in autonomous vehicles, and if you come away with one thing from this talk, I'd like you to think about whether or not an autonomous vehicle can be truly autonomous. What everyone is trying to do is to build a vehicle that can operate as well as you can driving it. So for instance, if I told you that in 3 to 5 years we were going to have a robot that could imitate everything you do as well as you do it, I think you'd laugh at me and you'd say, no, I think that's 20 to 30 years away. Same thing with a car. We can't make a car that is going to be as good as you in driving in the next 2 to 3 years. And so there is a way to solve that problem, and people are now starting to think about it. But that $80 billion that's being spent is going to be now coupled with something called V2X, which is vehicle to some type of infrastructure or persons or other vehicles. But that communication changed, because one thing that an autonomous vehicle can do far better than we can do is it can collaborate and communicate. We happen to believe that V2I, or the vehicle talking to the infrastructure, is one of the single most important areas that we can add value, and so we're focused uniquely on that. Here's just a quick diagram of how we think about this. So we put video sensors that you don't think of them as cameras, but they're actually understanding what's going on in the immediate area, whether there's an emergency vehicle coming or whether there's a pedestrian that may be crossing the street. We put these sensors on light poles. We use 5G to get that data to the MEC that Lonnie referred to, and then we do a ton of local low latency processing in that MEC so that we can then communicate back to any of the vehicles that are in the immediate area, because we can't afford the round trip to Seattle. So let's take an example. So here we have, and this could be actually representative of that poor woman in Phoenix, where you have a pedestrian, maybe with a bicycle, who just decides all of a sudden to dart out in traffic in front of, in this case, an autonomous bus. So the question is, what could we do about this? Because there's no amount of sensors you can put on that bus that is going to figure out across 2 lanes of traffic that that person is about to dart out. And the answer is, if you have infrastructure there, you actually have an awareness of what's happening on the street. So in this particular case, we have our video node 4K, which has, by the way, 256 gigabytes of flash in it, manufactured by Toshiba. And that is constantly watching and providing analytics on not only what's there, oh, that's a person, but also predictive analytics, what might that person do? And so we take that, and now we can understand what might happen, and we can signal the bus. So here's an example. This is one of our video nodes operating in New York City, and you can see how we're identifying vehicles. Whenever you see a box, that means that we understand what it is and where it's going. But I want to take a look at what you see here, which is a timeline. So On the left, we've got the video node. Then we've got to capture the image. We've got to do the recognition. We've got to do the predictive analytics. Then we have to transmit it to a access point through 5G. Then we have a long wait to get to, in this case, let's use Seattle. Then in Seattle, we do the compute. Then we have to go all the way back to the access point, and then we transmit the data to the car, and then the car brakes, and then we have the actual braking time. Now, if we take that, and instead of going to Seattle, say we're going to go to the nearest block, now all of a sudden, we've dramatically compressed the amount of time that we have, that we take in that time. And in this case, at city speeds, this is about 40 to 60 feet, which could make a huge difference. So, can I get the next slide, please? So, the last thing I'd like to do from a technical aspect is just talk a little bit about what can you do for us. So first of all, and I'm sure you know this, but as the amount of silicon dedicated to flash goes up, it's not going to be discrete flash chips. It's going to be integrated into devices that are local and typically out in the field. And those devices can't afford the interconnect cost of having a separate chip. Secondly, we need to integrate flash as a storage into the system's architecture, and I'll combine that with a third point here, which is the thing that kills us the most in this business by far is write fatigue. I was just talking to our engineers last night, getting some specs on what we're doing, and they said, if you can ask anything of that audience, please ask them, because what we're doing is we're hitting that flash harder and faster all the time, and we need 10 and 15-year lifetimes. So we actually over-provision flash right now just so that we can get the lifetime that we need. So if anything that you can do to help us there, and if you can get farther and farther up into the use cases to understand where we're going, it'll help both with business model development and also thinking about, well, what could we do to minimize the number of writes? For instance, if we re-architect the pipeline, so on and so forth. And just sort of some of the flash, wouldn't it be great? So a little secret about 5G. The reason it's so fast is because it's at such a high frequency, which means it doesn't go very far, which means we're going to have a 5G antenna on every block corner of every street in America. And instead of putting a transmitter receiver there, what we're going to do is just have an antenna. And then we're going to bring them back to these MEC installations, which will have compute, the radios, and so on. So this is all going to really happen. And if we just think about MEC alone, that's a lot of bytes that need to be supported with flash. And I didn't even include in there the exabyte or so of flash storage that would be required just to be up in the video sensors that will give situational awareness to these AV vehicles. So just to put a solid underline under Lonnie's point, a lot of this could not happen without flash. If we had to have hard disks everywhere, we'd be dead. And so thank you, but we have a lot of challenges ahead of us in order to make this a system that's really going to change the way people live, but also the quality with how they live. Thank you very much.
About the technology revolutions that are actually forcing us to rethink how we do business, right? So the technology portion of this is amazing, but it's causing us not just to rethink how we build product, but it's causing us how we have to rethink how we work with one another. It's revolutionizing relationships. Instead of coming together with more of a traditional vendor-customer relationship, we have to start thinking about how we co-create. How do we come together? And we do this not only with our vendors, with people like you in the audience, like our partners, like I was mentioning, Toshiba, who we work with all the time. We now need to work even more deeper. We need to start collaborating and co-creating together so that we can actually build for the future. And we're doing this with our customers as well. The way that we actually build relationships with people like Sacramento or Los Angeles or some of these other groups is a much different relationship than what we've had had in the past. We need to be thinking about this in a long-term fashion. And the most important reason why we have to do this is that we don't want to be just following the industry and chasing behind it. Within the communications industry, as well as in the flash industry, we have to lead for the future. We have to lay that path for the future. We have to know where it's going and build to it. That causes us to be able to completely change the way we design our products. We have to design in things that we wouldn't have thought of in the past. Software really plays a much stronger role in developing our hardware solutions, not the other way around. We really have to be thinking about future-proofing. How do we think about things that are going to last over a much, much longer period of time? So skating to where the puck is going to be is an incredibly important aspect of how we need to think about our own business models. Building for the future is also not just in that development, but it changes the way we actually execute on the ground. One of the main reasons I'm excited about being at Verizon is we understand how to be able to do that integration on the ground. And I think that every industry needs to be thinking about that, because you can no longer just simply throw a technology in and say, okay, now the rest is all up to you. We got to think about what it's really like in the ground. How do you do that complex level of integration across multiple ecosystems, multiple devices, and figure out how we're going to keep taking that technology to the next level together. We also need to be thinking about long-term investments. It's not just about a one-quarter sale. A lot of this is about building out a base of investment with cities, with manufacturers, with enterprises, and then seeing business models that roll out for the future. It's something that is a little bit unique in some industries, but it's something that's going to be more and more prevalent that we're seeing in industries that traditionally never had to think about it in that way. And then the last note that I wanted to be able to touch on is around the involvement of the community. This is something that Verizon is thinking about in everything we do, especially in my group with Smart Cities. We really want to make sure that whatever we're building out, we're thinking about how we can bring up that next generation, how we can involve people into that creation and that innovation that may not have normally had access. So I'll bring up an example from a broadband perspective. There's a lot of kids out there who actually don't have broadband in their home. Yet 70% of the teachers are actually assigning homework and their particular participation through internet-based modules. Now all of a sudden you've eliminated a huge part of the population from participating. These are the types of things that may not necessarily be use cases that have ROIs associated with it, but they're absolutely critical for us to be thinking about in our industries. And I know in the flash and storage industry, we need to be thinking about how to pull the community into that environment more and more as well. So that's the last thought that I wanted to be able to leave you with. Thank you again for the opportunity to be able to come and speak with you. It's an incredibly impressive group, and we're incredibly honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, take it.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you, Lonnie and Hugh. We've got time for one or two quick questions. You really painted a fascinating picture of the future for us. How far in the future is that? When can we expect to enjoy these benefits?
You know what, it seems like some of this is really far away, but it's not. We are actually actively working on many of these technologies right now with cities like Sacramento, Los Angeles, Boston. We're actually putting things in the ground and driving things forward. No pun intended, but autonomous mobility is driving forward at a faster speed than you can imagine, and we have to start getting in front of it.
Thank you. And with this flash audience here, what are the things we should be working on to enable the exciting future you've laid out?
Just as an example, a typical LTE link is about 500 milliseconds. A typical 5G link is going to be about 10 milliseconds. So we're going to knock it down by a factor of 50. However, if we're going to go compress a 4K video image, that can take 200 to 250 milliseconds, which means what we need to do is actually at the video sensor, we need to process it, and we can do that in 50 milliseconds. We can figure out what that object is. But if we do that at those speeds, that chip or that storage cell needs to last 10 or 15 years with super, super high duty cycles. So lots and lots of longevity.
Endurance, retention, low cost, low power, faster.
With high security.
Got it. All right, let's thank our speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.